The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, getting you ready for the 2018 fantasy football season. We got some rankings updates because we know there's going to be a lot of drafts happening this weekend. Then we'll re-up next Thursday and talk about what's going into the final weekend, the Labor Day weekend, where it's either this weekend or next weekend. It's like draft weekend for most people. So we'll get you up with updated ranks, the latest news, the latest training camp battles, the injuries, plus yesterday's NFC win total show and team preview already out. Go check that. Plus, give this episode a like, and in the comment section, leave your DK handle and tell us over under receiving yards. Give me a total for Jordan Howard receiving yards for the season. I'm very curious about it. Actually, you know what? You can put in receiving yards and you can put in receptions. Receptions and yards, DK handle, give the episode a like. Then you're in a draw for 20 DK dollars. So go check that out. Tomorrow on Saturday, the AFC win total show will be out, so be prepared for that. Comes out early morning. Sunday, Drew Dinkmeyer, Mike Leone will be on to break down NFL DraftKings strategy with using all their tools, the basic strategy behind cash and GPP, and plus how you can optimize your lineup and save time. And they walk us through that entire process. It's a really cool show. Would hope you could check that out on Sunday. Then we're back with golf and football all next week. It's going to be a great time. But for right now, we got Jake Seeley from theathletic.com chatting with us. You ready for this? Are you doing drafts this weekend? Because my big draft is this weekend.
I'm doing drafts every week, and I've been doing drafts for the last 2 months, and honestly, I'm starting to decline them because I already have about 14 or 15 with in-season management, and I don't know how I'm even going to do that.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. When you play these best ball drafts, you can do the drafts whenever you want. It's not a great way to mock because the strategy is different for it, but
right.
You still get a sense of where people are going. And I would recommend that everyone, just before you go in, whatever system that you're using, if you're doing an online draft, whether it be ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, My Fantasy League, just go in and use their system once just to get a sense of how it works, where the players are buried. That's always a great strategy to go in first. Just be familiar with the software because most people won't do that, and then they'll miss, there's always some years there's some player who's been trending up the charts, like potentially Chris Carson. I haven't gone on to Yahoo yet where I'm doing my draft to figure that out, but I bet you he's buried, and Peyton Barber's probably buried down in the rankings like 198 or 250, something like that, and they're gonna go higher. So just put them in your queue, remind yourself that they're there, and you'll know, and knowing your league mates is gonna be huge as well, that it's just one of these things where they're not gonna notice, you'll notice, and it'll get you value in the end. Do you have any other software tricks like that?
No, that's honestly the best one. It's just to find where those hidden players are. A perfect example is the Adrian Peterson, which I know we're going to talk about, but no draft software, no rankings, no anything out there had them in a spot like another one, Des Bryant. A lot of draft locations, he's either listed as no projection, so he's not even in the rankings. That's the best thing, like you said, is to go through, and because a lot of people rely on ADP and don't bring their own rankings and kind of just check on the board, and then don't realize there's some guy that's 3 rounds later that you just completely forgot about in the midst of the draft. Because everybody always says that, I'll remember those guys, and then you get in the middle of the draft and you completely forget about them.
Yeah, use your queue. That's always the big thing. But you brought up Adrian Peterson. Let's get right into Adrian Peterson because we haven't chatted since he actually signed with Washington. That now creates at least a ground game 3-headed monster, potentially, for Adrian Peterson, Fat Rob Kelly, and Samaje Perine. I don't think this affects Chris Thompson in this. Maybe I'll take away a few carries, but his role is still going to be 2 minutes, third down passing game when they're behind situations. What do we do with Peterson? Because I put him in my rankings. All my rankings right now are updated on DraftKingsPlaybook.com. Plus, I'll be updating them every day over the weekend too in case stuff changes. So you can go check those out right now. I've updated them immediately after recording this, so boom, you're going to get it. I'm not high on Peterson whatsoever. He might have a decent week 1, and maybe it's worth drafting him just for that trade asset, that if he has a hot first game in a revenge scenario against the Arizona Cardinals, or a first good 2 weeks, or maybe you luck in it, maybe that he is good, and I'm wrong about it, but there is cachet behind his name that if he does have a big week 1, some loser in your league will overpay for him. So it might be worth it as a trade asset, but in terms of straight drafting and performance, I still have him behind Corey Clement.
No, that's really what you're kind of looking at. Back to the Future, like my shirt that I didn't get to show you. See, Back to the Future with Rick and Morty. So there you go. Look, really, I said the same thing. Exactly what you're saying. You draft them as an RB4. I don't have a problem if you want to take Clement, because what you're hoping for with Adrian Peterson is that he comes out and plays well the first 2 weeks. I don't need him to have that 30 carry game like we saw last year to just play well, come out with about 150 yards and a touchdown in the first 2 games. And as you said, somebody in the league is going to overpay in a trade. I know you get the pushback of everybody knows that. Everybody knows you're going to be trying to sell high over the first 2 weeks. Yeah, but there's always the one person, possibly 2 or 3, that bought into it last year. And he was what 60% owned in DFS and cash games after that week last year. You should remember, Pat. The fact is Adrian Peterson is at the end of his career. He still has a little juice to have spurts, but over the long haul of the season, if he even plays 16 games, I don't expect more than RB3 value, and that's only if he plays 16 games.
So if you had to draft one, I guess the draft value in the stock for Adrian Peterson is more valuable than the other 2, but I think if we look at the entire season scope, and I don't really want any of these guys outside of Chris Thompson, so I don't really care, but I think that Rob Kelly will end up outscoring him over the course of the season.
I wouldn't put my money on that as of today, but mostly because we know Adrian Peterson. We know that he'll start yelling at the coach if he's not in the game, and I don't think he came to Washington to stand on the sidelines and watch Rob Kelly or Samaje Perine on the field. So it would the scenario for Kelly is the fact that Adrian Peterson has nothing left or gets hurt, and then he comes in and scores more. If you told me both of them were playing 14 or more games, like I don't even need 16 to Adrian Peterson, I'd put my money on Adrian Peterson just because I think he's going to get more of a workload. Like they brought him in to use him. I don't know how much he has left, but it might be a Frank Gore situation, which just by the amount of touches and the amount of games played at the end of the season, it's like, oh, look, he averaged 6 points a week, but now he's RB 33 just because he played every game.
Yeah, I'm not really digging it whatsoever. I think there's that trade value argument we talked about. Like, if it was you and you had a chance to draft Adrian Peterson, he was still left on the board, what round would you actually take him in?
I actually just took him in the 9th round of a draft. So
that seems high.
Nah, for what's on the board in the 9th, it was end in the 9th. I was on the close to the turn. I think I had it was like the 11th pick or so almost the 10th. I think at that point, looking what's on the board for running backs, especially at that point of running back, I mean, I could just look and tell you, like, we're talking at that point, Ty Montgomery, Giovanni Bernard, Latavius, and that's the thing. It's like most of these are either backups or in timeshares. At that point, it's like, hey, I have Adrian Peterson. Maybe I get a few good games at him at the beginning of the season, and maybe I get a few good games and able to trade him.
Yeah, like if it's for me, and let's say standard-wise, I think he has more value. In terms of PPR, I would still rather take the gamble on guys like Eckler and Sproles and your like Theo Riddicks, like your pass-catching backs that can help stabilize your back end. That might be a lower EV percentage based on the fact that you might be able to get something good in return for Peterson if he pops week 1 or just looks like he has a large part of the market share or whatever. But I think I'd still rather, for me at least, I'd either target receivers in that area or I would just end up taking one of these pass-catching running backs.
Or even flyers to somebody you mentioned before, like a Clement or an Aaron Jones when he comes back from suspension. If Jamal Williams starts off really poorly and he comes back into a great situation. So those or Nick Chubb. If Carlos Hyde at this point looks, I know we're going to eventually talk about that, but if he was to take over by week 6, I'd rather take a flyer to your point at that point. But if you were running back thin at that time of the draft, it kind of, like you said, it depends on what you're doing so far.
So Christian McCaffrey is up next. All the talk in the leading up to the preseason was, hey, he's going to get like 25 to 30 touches a game. And then we all just kind of laughing like, that's kind of ridiculous. That's going to get him hurt. But at least through the preseason, when we're talking about playing with the ones, and sometimes that can be misleading, Christian McCaffrey's the man in the backfield. He's carrying the ball. He's catching. I moved him up in the rankings. Like I can't deny it anymore. I actually moved him ahead of Leonard Fournette in terms of PPR scoring. I think in standard scoring, I'd still rather have Fournette, Freeman, and potentially Jarek. But I think that he is now a part of that tier. I have him as the number 8 overall running back in terms of full point PPR. And I'm thinking, I mean, I don't want to say too much about my keeper league strategy, but we throw a lot of guys back. Like I have like the 7th pick that might end up where he ends up going to me because there's so many big names obviously off the board. But I just think in full point PPR, it's going to be, unless he gets hurt, it's going to be tough for him not to like challenge 100 catches. And if he gets like 150 on the ground, then we're dancing.
And that's the issue here, because we joked about it and laughed, and I made the comparison to Not Another Teen Movie, is because he's going to get killed at that point, and that's the biggest concern. But if somehow he doesn't, like let's just take obviously the good side of it. Let's play I don't know what the opposite of devil's advocate is, but you play 16 games, he doesn't get hurt, he averages 15 to 20. Let's forget about the 20 to 25 and just talk about 15 to 20, which is conceivable, around 17, 18 per game. He gets around 150 to 175 carries, plus those, what you're talking about, almost 100 receptions. At that point, we're probably talking about somebody who's knocking on the top 5 running back door. So with you, I actually now have him at 9 in PPR, and I don't feel great about it just because I'm so concerned about him getting hurt at his size. I will say on the flip side of it is something I saw somebody tweet out earlier this week. I don't remember who it was, so sorry to that person, but it's something I said when he was coming out of college too, is there was the misnomer that he can't handle running between the tackles. That's Stanford's offense was basically running between the tackles with Christian McCaffery and letting him take those hits. The guy's just explosive and finds those creases and is gone. So the good thing is that he can avoid some of those hits by himself. Now, what it comes down to is he going to get hurt? Well, I mean, we can go down this road too. I mean, Dalvin Cook is coming off a knee injury. Leonard Fournette has ankle injuries all the way through college and now in the NFL. So that's why where you have him at 8, I have him at 9.
I actually don't. I went and looked at it. I have him at number 10. I lied about that.
So I have him one spot ahead of you.
You have it. Yeah, you have him one spot ahead of me. I think 10's a decent ranking for him. But, like, I guess the negatives would be the offensive line in Carolina's already beat up. There is that injury concern if there's too much tread on the tires. And then Cam Newton stealing his touchdowns.
Yeah, well, obviously that's always the biggest thing, but I think that you're looking at the production and just the touches are going to be they're going to be amazing if he's going to get. If you're talking about him getting 250 touches plus, I don't see how he's not a lock for a top 10.
All right, let's stick with these running backs. Reports came out right before we came on air that Nagy is saying that Jordan Howard is going to be in on third downs, hence why that in the comment section, you give the episode a like, leave your DraftKings handle, and tell me the reception and catch total for Jordan Howard this season. I'm still not buying it. Like, they're going to try to use him there. He's going to make a mess of the situation. They're going to see that Cohen is better in that role on third down, and I don't care. What would you project out his catches at? If he tops 30, I'm going to be stunned.
Hold on, I'm pulling it up right now. I'm going to tell you exactly where my final projections for him. Well, not my final for my week 2 projections came for Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard's receptions checked in at 29.1.
Right, so if you set that as the over/under, I would definitely take the under.
See, I'm not going to because everybody's like, oh, he doesn't fit Nagy's system. Well, yeah, he does, actually, because he's tremendous out of the shotgun, and he is a better pass catcher than people. Look, he had plenty of drops, and there's no denying, and some of them were, egregious, especially being on national television, watching it in the end zone as he could have had a touchdown. So there's been some that have really been bad. But let's also talk about the fact that Amari Cooper does the exact same thing as a wide receiver, and everybody wants to apologize for him every single year.
But everything is still baked in with Amari Cooper that he's going lower in drafts. People have now,
wide receiver 1.
That's kind of crazy. But people will draft in PPR Jordan Howard as a fringe wide receiver, running back 1 after they hear this news, and maybe they're right. I'm not willing just to overreact to a report that came out.
Right, but I think I'm not saying to overreact. I agree with you. Don't push him to a RB1. I have him outside of RB1 in PPR around 14 or 15.
Okay, so we're not that far off then. I have him at number 17 in PPR.
Okay, so yeah, we're not that far off. I feel more confident. This report only makes me feel better about the fact that, look, just because he's on third down doesn't necessarily mean he's even going to see receptions. It's just mean he's not coming off the field. I think the point is they want to use Jordan Howard. They know what Jordan Howard's talent is. He's just not definitively coming off the field every third down and every pass catching opportunity. He's still going to get mixed in. He was still mixed in last year. He had more than 20 receptions last year. It's not a huge number for running backs, especially in PPR. But I think that's the point people need to focus on is we can see the exact same Jordan Howard we saw last year, which was RB1 in non-PPR and just outside in PPR. And that's fine. That's what he's going to be again. I think this is more about the people who are pushing him down to that mid RB2 status or even lower and vaulting Tariq Cohen into this fringe RB2 where I'm going to start him every week because he's going to take over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more down on the offense for the Bears in certain parts than a lot of other people. I think he's a viable running back too in PPR, a fringy number 1 in non-PPR, like you mentioned. Cohen, and it's not super on my radar right now. I'm not going to end up with any of them, but there's another report that just came out that Shady McCoy is dealing with a groin injury, and that's why he's been held out. They're not letting him practice. Does that worry you with McCoy? Because the groin, hamstrings in the preseason, those things tend to linger if they're not sorted out. And we know that if you draft McCoy, you need him to have a lot of volume.
Right, and that's the thing is we don't expect the efficiency to be great because that team is just awful. But he is the offense. It definitely concerns me if we still continue to see this into next week. I don't expect to see him a lot. Maybe we don't even see him at all this in week 3 dealing with this. If we're getting close to the end of week 4, which he's not going to play anyway, and then he's not still practicing, then I'm going to start to get a little bit concerned. And as you said, because the type of injury he has, especially at his age and with his wear and tear, they can linger. So as of right now, I've been taking LaShawn McCoy at the end of the second round. If he's into third, I'm taking him every single time, because if LaShawn McCoy plays 15 games, he's going to be a top 10 running back. I don't care how bad the offense is. The offense was terrible last year with no receivers, and he was still a top 10. I think he finished it like 6th or 7th last year. So this is more, I'll put it this way. The injury is more concerning to me than the offense is.
Okay, so right now I have him listed as running back number 14 in PPR. That's behind Jarek, Freeman, Fournette, McCaffery. Those are the guys above him, and I still would take all those guys above him.
I have him at 12 in front of Freeman and McKinnon, and if this continues, I would move both of those ahead of him.
Okay. Next story we have, T.Y. Hilton's shoulder sprain happened a week ago. It appears like he's going to be all right. Any problems with him?
I don't think so. I think we're okay. It sounds like it's a day-to-day. It sounds like he should be fine, that if this was regular season, it's one of those ones that he would push through. So when it comes down to T.Y. Hilton, the only person I'm really – well, obviously he has to be healthy, but I was going to say the only health that I'm really concerned about is just Andrew Luck. I want Andrew Luck to get a lot of reps here in week 3, because he's definitely looked rusty for the first 2.
Which is probably something that you would expect going into this with a guy that missed an entire season with a shoulder problem. So just seeing the arm strength back, I think is going to be good for me. I have Hilton at 10 right now. That's one spot above Diggs, Evans, and Thielen. Too high, too low.
In PPR?
Yeah.
Well, not too high, because I'm at 11.
All right, so we're on the same page in terms of T.Y. Hilton. The other Colts news, Marlon Mack could now miss week 1 with that hamstring injury, so just throw him off the table potentially. And now that leaves us with Jordan Wilkins, Christine Michael, have fun with that one, and Nyheim Hines. But Michael is the one playing with the first team where Mack was playing, at least for a lot of the starters. But, I mean, Luck's trying to get more reps in. I would still rather have Wilkins the most of anyone in this backfield.
That's who I'm drafting the most, especially because Hines is fumbling a lot. And look, the thing with Hines too is I think people got a little bit too excited. This is the PPR thing again. This goes back to Tariq Cohen and all the rest of them, is because so many people play PPR now. It's like, oh, this guy's going to catch 40 passes. Let's move him up and treat him like an RB3. Like he's still only on the field a limited amount of time, even in PPR. Theo Riddick, in his best days, still had weeks where you were disappointed and you only got 4 or 5 points because he had 2 catches for 13 yards. So like to overrate the pass catching running backs, I think is a mistake people are falling into a lot these past couple seasons. That was Nyheim Hines' role at best. He might not even have that right now because of all the issues he's had so far. So now, as you said, you kind of fall into what has always been the best all-around running back this entire time. And Jordan Wilkins, Marlon Mack is a little bit more explosive, but as I've told you before, and we've talked about many times, he tries to do too much with every single play, and now he's hurt on top of it. Honestly, I'm not doing it. I won't draft it just because I'm so tired of it, just like Jeff Janis. But this is setting up to like it's going to happen. It's going to end up being Kristen Michael who ends up leading this backfield.
Yeah, well, I mean, until everyone accepts that it's never going to happen, it never will happen. The truthers are back out on the internet already. I got to draft Christine Michael.
Are.
Hey, he's going to have a big week 1, and people are going to. And people are
draft that was just in?
What? When?
9th round.
Really?
Yes.
All right. Good luck with that one. But best of luck to you. But like, no thanks for me.
There's always somebody. I'm telling you, there's always.
On DKPlaybook.com, Adam Levitan is writing these columns every week about the usage in preseason, some interesting news and notes from either training camp, people's playing time in terms of injuries. And here was a cool one that, I mean, it's an aggregation of what he's seeing around put in one place. So highly recommended article. I'm sure most have checked it out already. But Jack Doyle ran pass routes on 11 of Andrew Luck's 12 dropbacks week 1. And then he was on the field for 21 of 23 of Luck snaps, got three targets on 13 pass attempts week 2. So he's clearly ahead of Ebron, and there's going to be some Vance McDonald news coming out too with a foot injury. How far should we be drafting Jack Doyle, I guess, is the first question in a PPR setting, because I've already moved him up to around tight end number 12.
Yeah, I actually have him sitting around tight end 10 this entire offseason, and I thought that he was getting too much hate for the. I don't know why. Like, even with the addition of Eric Ebron, let's talk about this offense. It's a 2 tight end heavy offense. Let's talk about every single season. It's always, damn it, the other guy scored a touchdown. Before him, it was Eric Swoop scoring touchdowns, and then before that, it was Dwayne Allen was scoring touchdowns while we wanted Jack Doyle, or Doyle was scoring them when we wanted him, or even before that with Fleener. There's always been the other tight end who steals touchdowns and receptions while our guy ends up being the lead. And that's why Jack Doyle was always 10, is because you have that threat where he's not the 70-75% workload tight end like a lot of teams use for their only tight end. So you worry about him having a few down weeks when it's not his time. But when it comes down to it, he is the number one. It's more about, is Eric Ebron a 20th tight end, 18th tight end, somewhere around there because they use tight end 2 sets so much?
Well, here's the thing. With Ebron, he was only on the field for 5 of 23 of luck snaps.
Right.
So either he's not getting the offense, his alligator arms have resurfaced, and maybe he's not the red zone threat they thought. Maybe he's not a good enough blocker. Maybe there's someone else that steps into that role and takes over in the blocking part of the 2 tight end set, because Ebron's just not finding the field when Luck's out there.
No, you say alligator arms. I always picture the dinosaur from Despicable Me, like in the corner where he's trying to reach the guy like this. You know what I'm talking about? Did you ever see Despicable Me? Or am I just talking about myself?
I think you're just talking about yourself. When I'm thinking dinosaurs, I'm thinking kick the baby, like the old rubber dinosaurs. By the way, the end of Dinosaurs, the TV show, it's like saddest ending ever. They all die with the Big Bang. Spoiler alert.
That's a really good point. It is one of them.
Everyone's just dead.
I don't know. Futurama's ending was kind of somewhat a little bit sad too, if you think about it.
The first run of Futurama, or like the new run of Futurama?
The second run.
I don't think
the first run was kind of sad too, because they kind of just left you hanging.
Yeah, and he had the robot devil hands, and then he
lost them, and then they play that little crappy cartoon symphony. But in any case, so the point is that's obviously concerning for the people that are drafting Eric Ebron and best balls and stuff like that. Nobody's ever drafting him in a standard league anyway. I mean standard as in 12 teams, 16 rounds, not standard as in non-PPR. So if you look at to go back to the original point, Jack Doyle has been underrated in my opinion the entire offseason, and hopefully to get more people on board, hopefully for people to be drafting for themselves, not to ruin his draft value.
Yeah, so draft Jack Doyle. Don't even write down Eric Ebron on your sheet. That's probably the best way to go about this. Next,
do it and then just drop it.
Yeah. So the other move that I've made, back to Chicago for a second, Trey Burton. I had to put him up in the rankings. That's the one part of this offense that I actually have now committed to that I do trust. And I keep looking at this tight end landscape, and you're like, hey, is it going to be Jimmy Graham? Is he going to catch 17 touchdowns? It's like, no, I don't think so. He might average like two catches a game on like 4 targets. With Greg Olsen, I'm not sure what the upside with so many people in. I think he's going to be fine. I have him at number 5 in my tight end rankings. Delaney Walker's hurt. I moved Trey Burton up to number 4 in my tight end rankings.
Wow. That's a lot higher than I have him. Honestly, though, it wouldn't surprise me.
The thing is, I start looking at this, and he's still going later than a lot of these guys, which is really nice. Like, where did he go in the last draft that you did? 7th round, I'm guessing? Maybe 8th?
8th. Yeah. There's 2 things. I actually took him in the 8th, and I actually took him as the 7th tight end off the board in front of people I have ranked in front of him. And that's not the first time that's happened, because what ends up happening is I usually own the other players so I own a lot of Jameson Crowder. I own a lot of Randall Cobb. I own a lot of Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs. So when it comes down to it, if I'm on the board and it's Trey Burton versus those guys, I'm drafting Trey Burton because I don't want 2 receivers from the same team, as in the receiver and the tight end. I'm trying to avoid that. So that group is so tightly knit that when you say 4, I think it's a little low. I think that's his ceiling. But again, it wouldn't surprise me because Greg Olsen's looked miserable in last season. And he was talking about retiring. And, Evan Ingram, I think there's a lot of questions of his efficiency. If it doesn't improve, he's probably going to see a little bit less of a target share this year. He needs to improve his efficiency. So the Trey Burton scenario is there. I just think that's a ceiling that I wouldn't buy him at that.
No, I mean, where he's ranked and where he's going in draft are 2 completely different things. I think 7th, 8th, even if you want to spend like a late 6th, then that was your move. I mean, you're probably now paying for what his ceiling could potentially be, but compared to like Olsen, Walker, Graham, Ingram, Rudolph, and Reed, there is the potential for Trey Burton to be the number 1 receiver on his team, and that's just out of the question for the other guys. He could be. There's a chance that he ends up with more targets than Allen Robinson does. There is.
I would put that like 5% chance.
I see. I think it's much higher than that. And I'm like, by much higher, I mean like there's a 25 to 30% chance. But let's say he's the number 2 on the team. I mean, there's a very high degree of that happening, and you can't even make that case for some of the other guys. So if you can mine like 70% Kelsey value out of Burton, I think that's worth one tight end number 4, because the week-to-week numbers are actually going to be quite solid, I think.
I think that's more of what it is. So where I say I think there's a 5% chance he leads, I think it's more of like 80% that he's the number 2. Like, I really do think, I think Allen Robinson is going to have 23% target share for this team. But I think that Trey Burton will lead everybody else, including Anthony Miller, including probably seeing more targets than the combined backfield of Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. So I'm with you on that one. And that's why I've been drafting. It's like, because I don't have a problem taking him there if the other options are that closely grouped. I mean, we're talking about, just in the fantasy points projected that I have for him, the gap from Greg, that's including Greg Olsen, who I actually have at number 4. From Greg Olsen all the way down to Trey Burton is less than 20 points.
And the way that I looked at it, too, that's part of the tier 2 after the big 3 at tight end. Like, I started putting up Burton next to Delaney Walker. The roles in their offense in terms of where they are in the pecking order are relatively similar. I think that Burton has a better chance of leading his team in targets than Walker does in Tennessee. And then I just think about the upside purposes, and Burton's upside is just higher.
It is. So to go back to your point, though, I want to double down on is I don't have a problem taking him as the tight end. Even if you want to take him as tight end 4 off the board, as long as it's going in that 7th, 8th, 9th round range. Like, don't push him up into the 5th, 6th round and take him there. That's my issue.
Going to Pittsburgh, Vance McDonald. It was reported he's dealing with plantar fasciitis, but it's a foot problem nonetheless. He'd leave injury particulars to the team, but made it clear he's hoping to play week 1. I don't like that hoping news. I liked Vance McDonald coming into the season. He's someone I drafted like late and like very last round if I just waited on tight end. I think I had him as my tight end number 11 or tight end number 9, 12, somewhere around that range. I'm going to have to drop him down. I'm going to have to draft Jack Doyle in front of him now. I had him originally ahead of Doyle. I'm going to have to move Doyle ahead of him, right?
Yeah, I have him at 17, and I'm excited for him too. I like him, and actually, when I talked to Mike Tomlin said, love the talent. We just want to get him on the field, and that was almost 2 months ago now. So if you look at it, this is still an issue. They hope, as you said, they hope to get him out there for week 1. If it is plantar fasciitis, that's something that has wrecked college players, NFL players, basketball players. Like, this ruins seasons, because the best way I could describe it for anybody out there is take a ball bearing, but then put those little spikes on it and put it in your shoe underneath your foot. And that's what it feels like. And it's just, it's miserable, and it doesn't go away without rest. Like, you can't get surgery for it. There's nothing to do. You just have to rest your foot. So if he's going to try and play through it, it will bother him for the entire season.
Yeah, and we've seen before Vance McDonald has struggled with injuries. That's why I have the concern with all of this. So I might even move him down below like Njoku, behind Ricky Seals-Jones, and into that like 17 range where you have him, because I would have no faith in playing him that he might play like 3 snaps and exit the game. So
let me ask you this then.
Okay.
Tyler Eifert or Vance McDonald?
Probably Eifert.
That's what's crazy to think about. It's like, that's where I'm leaning now, because Eifert, I'm going to get some games out of him. Vance McDonald, like you just said, might play 3 snaps to be done.
The problem is I'm just not going to draft either of those guys. They're just not on my radar, so I don't really care. True. So I think that unless you're playing in like a 16-person league, these guys are just undraftable. I would still put like a watch note next to Vance McDonald to see if he's actually okay and gets over it. Like, and when you have plantar fasciitis, they just put you like a golf ball underneath your foot and just roll it around all day. So maybe he's well equipped to do that, and then it's no longer a problem. I don't know. Next story up, we have just rankings update. Charles Sims went on IR. That leaves the backfield in Tampa Bay of Peyton Barber, Jaquiz Rogers, and RG2, Ronald Jones II. There's also Sean White, the rookie, back there as well. I moved up Peyton Barber to around number 24 in my running back rankings. He's the one who's going to start the year. And if he can do well in pass protection and out of the backfield catching the ball where Ronald Jones has not, at least early in the season, he could be a legitimate 3-down back with Sims gone away. Because Sims is out for the year and put on IR.
Well, so that's a good example. So somebody asked me that yesterday. They're like, well, look, Sims is on the IR. That's got to help Ronald Jones, right? Like, you haven't been paying attention then, because Ronald Jones, when he was drafted, Ronald Jones, period, was not going to be involved in like for everybody that wants to complain about Jordan Howard, Ronald Jones takes the cake. He is, remember way back when Alfred Morris was somehow a top 10 running back despite never catching the ball? That's Ronald Jones. And that's what you were hoping for Ronald Jones is, hey, you know what? You're dominant on first and second down. You're explosive. You know how to find the creases. You got the big plays. You got the skills. And then, you know what? We just don't see you in the passing game, but you're so good on the other end that you can be an RB2. That's why he'll never be an RB1, especially at this point of the NFL and how much pass catching running backs are used. But there's nobody that's had a worse offseason. And this situation doesn't open the door for Ronald Jones because he's not going to step into the third down role because he was questionable to even be used in that, even if he was the lead guy. So to your point, this helps Peyton Barber. I initially had Peyton Barber back before this news even happened, so I'll update my rankings I usually do after every single preseason weekend. I had Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber actually very close to each other because I still think Jones is more talented, especially the explosiveness part of it on first and second down, but Peyton Barber is better all around. I might even move Peyton Barber in front of Jones now because I don't see how they don't use him on third down. Quiz Rogers is fine, but I think Peyton Barber will be used a lot more than he will.
Yeah, so in the rankings right now, I have Kenyon Drake, Deion Lewis, Jamal Williams, Peyton Barber, and then Carlos Hyde, who I actually moved up. He's just been playing all the first-team reps for the Browns, and it looks like the wrist injury, the x-rays came back negative on Tyrod, so he's probably still going to be good to go. I know he came back in the game, the preseason game, but you still wanted to see if there was any ligament damage or anything. It appears like there's none. I don't know if Hyde's going to keep this job all year, but it seems like initially out of the gate that until they turn this team, probably until Mayfield is ready to go or Chubb just blows everyone out of the water, Hyde is going to have viability as a low-end number 2 flex play.
Yeah, and actually here, if you want to quote, I'll give you straight from The Athletic. I asked Zach Johnson, who covers the Browns, because I said, I originally thought that Nick Chubb, talent-wise, I still think he's definitively better than Carlos Hyde. People forget because before the injury in college, people were saying Nick Chubb could be better than Todd Gurley, replacing him, and people forgot how good he is. And you've seen it in spurts so far. But to the point was, I thought that Chubb was a great draft and stash. Week 5, 6, he takes over and pushes Hyde to the side. But to the point, the one part I'll say was, he says the same thing. He goes, in May, I thought Chubb would be the starter. He hasn't taken many snaps with the starters and is number 3. Like, he's not even getting the opportunity where, the first team reps has always been overblown because that's usually how you evaluate players more so than say, oh, he's definitively going to be the guy because he's playing with the first team. The fact that Chubb's barely getting touches with the first team shows that, they don't even really care to see what he can do with the first team. They kind of know what he is, but they want Carlos Hyde out there because they want him comfortable in the offense. So I'm with you. Carlos Hyde, unless he gets hurt or just starts to underperform at some point, I think could be an RB2 possibly for the entire season. Chubb might actually be a better 2019 than 2018 candidate.
Josh Gordon has reported back to the team, hasn't played yet. Where do we rank Josh Gordon? Do we even expect him to play week? I still have him number 21 in my wide receiver rankings, but I legit have no idea what to do with the guy.
Yeah, I originally had him inside my top 15. I've moved them all the way down to 23 because now I have him basically. I took out games. That's what I did. I factored in the risk of him missing a couple games, whether it's the beginning of the season, whether it's the middle of the season. I just took out some plays and snaps and games and just moved him down. Now he's down to 23. I asked him about Josh Gordon as well. And he said the same thing. He expects him to be out there week 1, but 16 games is a different question than week 1. It sounds like he should be there, but will he play all 16? Nobody knows. The team doesn't even seem to know. So I think you have to factor that risk in. And it goes back to what we said before. Even when I had him at 15, and I'm going to say the same thing I told you at that time, Pat, is that if you draft risky wide receivers or boomer bust guys, like if you draft a T.Y. Hilton early, or if you draft somebody who's going to be up and down, or Amari Cooper, who has his own risk, I'm probably avoiding Josh Gordon. If I come out of the gates and I have some reliable guys like Devontae Adams and even Demaryius Thomas or somebody like that, I'll be more likely to draft Josh Gordon to balance that risk.
Okay, so Josh Gordon or Allen Robinson in the PPR?
Allen Robinson. No question for me.
Josh Gordon or Tyreek Hill?
Tyreek Hill.
Josh Gordon or Alshon Jeffrey?
I'll go Gordon. Jeffrey's situation, he was on track. He was supposed to start in the offseason pup, and everything was fine. And now he gets getting pushed back. Now they're talking about missing week 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, that they don't want to put him on the regular season pup because he could be back before week 6. So that now I'm starting to really get scared about Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm going to move Jeffrey down in terms of where I have him ranked. Right now he's on tier 4 of my wide receivers along with Josh Gordon. I might drop him back to that next pack, which features like Crabtree, Corey Davis, Randall Cobb, Golden
That's
Tate.
where I have him.
Golden Tate. So yeah, that's the range for him.
I have him sandwiched between Brandon Cooks and Marquise Goodwin.
Okay, I'm more down on Cooks. Like, so would you go Goodwin or Gordon?
I would go Gordon.
Okay, that's close. That's a lot closer than we thought it would be 2 weeks ago.
People are saying that. I think the fact is he's going to end up there, and that's too high because now you're drafting him at the ceiling.
All right, Jacksonville. Is there any receiver worth owning? Even Marquise Lee in a PPR. Is do we know?
I think so, but it's not. So here's the thing. I don't think that there's a scenario where we're all wrong. Like as of today, Marquise Lee looks like, hey, he's the safe one. He's the one that, especially in PPR, you can have as your wide receiver 5. His role is locked in. Let's have a conversation about the other guys. Why I feel better about it as today is because this. I was a Dante Moncrief guy. I thought that he has the skills to be a number 1. He's been miserable this offseason. I mean, they're talking that he's behind and battling now DJ Chark for snaps. So if he's down, we've pushed him aside. So now we're down to D.D. Westbrook and Keelan Cole. Every person I've talked to who covers the team, everybody who's down there talking about it, like even some of the coaching staff, is they love Keelan Cole. Like they want, and you've seen that because if you look down, this is a first team offense type of situation that you can put a little weight into, is they are giving Keelan Cole every situation when it comes down to 2 wide receivers. It's Lee and Cole. It's Lee and Cole. So I am drafting Cole and Lee only. But all that being said, if we got to the end of the season as D.D. Westbrook and DJ Chark, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened.
In Green Bay, Michael Lombardi from The Ringer reported that Randall Cobb was being shopped around. Ian Rappaport came back and disputed that and said, no, he wasn't. Teams just called about see if he was available or not to bring him in. Are we still good with Cobb? No worries there. And it seems like Equinemius St. Brown, or State Brown, if he was a college, he's played 71% of the snaps out of the slot this season, in this preseason when Cobb hasn't been on the field. We know that's where Cobb plays. Do you have interest in either two? Because I still like Cobb a lot.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of Cobb. As I mentioned before, that's why I don't have a lot of Jimmy Graham, is because I'm drafting so much Randall Cobb that I don't want Jimmy Graham on the same team. And Randall Cobb, he will reach a point where I don't want him anymore. If he starts getting into the 6th round, early 7th, I still might, depending on what my team is. But his value is starting to rocket up there because so many people are talking about him, the fact that he's being disrespected. When it comes to St. Brown, I don't care about him. I've been one of the people that have been the biggest haters on him, and it's because I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I've seen so much of him. The slot doesn't surprise me because they're trying to find a way to get some value, maybe get some value of him being on the field, because Jamon Moore, according to reports, has looked awful. So now it's down to Equinemius St. Brown and Marquise Vaz Scantlin, or whatever that guy that name is that I could never pronounce properly. I think they're just hoping to get some value out of some of those guys. But I think the 3 that we're talking about are obviously Adams and Cobb. And then if it's the other one, it's Geronimo Allison, because he can play the outside. Yeah,
I actually like Allison in this situation. I think he's a sneaky play for like a last round draft flyer kind of thing. We'll talk about those guys later on, just people to take after the 10th round that could benefit your team. I got some Giants news for you. How about this? Cody Latimer has won the wide receiver 3 job. You excited?
No, because it doesn't matter, because it's a Shermer offense, which goes back to 2 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. So you're going to see a lot more Rhett Ellison than you will Cody Latimer. So if this was last year and it was the Ben McAdoo system and there was the holdover from that with the 3 wide, sure, you could get a little excited about Cody Latimer. Well, also because they had nobody on the field last year. But at this point with the Shermer offense, you can't get excited about the 3rd wide receiver for the Giants.
Rex Burkhead returned to practice with his knee injury over the weekend. Do you have any current injury concerns, not whether he will get injured or not, but current injury concerns for week 1 with Burkhead?
Of course I do, because he's been hurt in the past and he's got a slight tear, which tear could just be a sprain, but he's got something, and he's obviously going through the rehab process of whatever it is, because it's not that major, but it's something that's there, and it's something that's there with somebody who's been injured and banged up more than once throughout his career. So Rex Burkhead's a concern when it comes down to that, but he's still, if we could take draft cost out of the equation, you know me, I'm always going to take the cheapest running back for the Patriots. And for me, it's been a hell of a lot of James White in PPR. Nobody wants him for some reason, and I'm befuddled why nobody wants him. But when it comes down to, if I could just have somebody, if I could just pick out of a hat and say that's the running back I want, it would still be Rex Burkhead.
Yeah, I still love Rex Burkhead, but I have no problems, especially in a PPR, grabbing them both. Because like you mentioned, James White is not like going in drafts, which is kind of crazy. I have him as top 30-ish running back. I think he's 33 in the PPR running back rankings. And he's in that like Theo Riddick range, but I think I might move him up a little bit because I'm going to move Cohen down, Ice Cream Cohen. It's a great situation, especially week 1. Everyone's going to play Burkhead on DraftKings because he's $4,300, which is fine. Like, that's a very smart move. But the pivot might not be like, hey, I'll take someone else in that area. I'll take James White instead, especially with that pass rush coming at Tom Brady very quickly. Just get the ball out, man.
Can you edit that part out? Because I was really I was planning to do that in week 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the point of the show. I got to give people what I'm seeing. I mean, I probably came to that conclusion 3 weeks after you did, and I'm sure it's been out there. But it popped into my mind. I thought I'd spit it out.
We're not the only ones, but you should do like that censor beep. You should be like, I'm putting in and then like so people just have no idea.
The censor is reserved for Cust only with the craziness he spouts.
Oh, like what? Dipping Oreos in orange juice or something like that?
Yeah, or putting milk in. You do that too, though. Put milk in the bowl before the cereal.
That's the one time where I finally agreed with him was the milk before the cereal.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
You can control how much it is, and it's crunchy the entire time.
I mean, what are you doing eating cereal? You're not like 3 years old.
I actually haven't eaten cereal in numerous years, mostly because my teeth are so sensitive, the cold milk bothers me.
So that's not good. You need Sensodyne. The Pat Mayo Experience, brought to you by Nice Teeth and Sensodyne. Miami.
I actually tried the next level stuff, and it still doesn't work. Go ahead.
That's too bad. All right. Miami. It's now being reported, I don't know how much I believe this, but this is from the Miami Herald, that Frank Gore and Kenyon Drake will both play a lot. Fucking fantastic.
There's your censor going there right there?
No. Like, can Frank Gore just retire so I can have Kenyon Drake all to myself? I had to move Kenyon Drake down, Gore up a little bit, because I can see this all playing out in real time in my mind of what's going to happen. Gore's going to get like 15 carries a game for 3.4 yards per pop, and it's going to be crappy. And then Drake's going to have like these big games. Everyone's going to be excited. Then every week they'll just go back to Gore. Drake is still the one to own, but I had to put him, I had originally had him up in like a higher tier, but I had to move him down to that like Jamal Williams, Jay Ajayi tier, Royce Freeman. Just there's so much risk involved with him. I still think that there is good upside, but you can't be spending a 3rd round pick on Kenyon Drake. You just can't do it.
No, I'm gonna move him down a little bit. Initially, heading after week 2, I had him sandwiched between Howard and Alex Collins, and I honestly would take Alex Collins, Royce Freeman, Derrick Henry, and I'm not you know me, I'm not a big Derrick Henry guy. Jay Ajayi, Lamar Miller. And I mean, now we're talking down, he's Marshawn Lynch, Devin Coleman territory. And I think that's where he needs to be at this point, because there's only so long where we can sit here and say, you know what, you can keep saying you want to use Frank Gore. It doesn't make sense. So we don't believe you. But after some point of a year's worth of hating the Drake, I mean, this is the same thing. Let's go back. Let's talk about Lamar Miller. Go back to when he was with the Dolphins. We complained time and time again, give him more touches. Look how good he is. And this team never has. Now it's a completely different regime back then, but for whatever reason, the Dolphins have just been annoying when it comes to running backs.
Hate the Drake. Maybe that's the whole problem down in Miami. Gase hates the Drake. Tennessee.
Why do we have to buy him a birthday present anyway?
Tennessee, Rashard Mathews seems like he's going to be activated off the PUP list. It turned out that it was a knee injury the entire time. Who knew? And surgery, yeah. But it looks like he's going to be ready for week 1. What do you think that does to this Tennessee offense? Because it looks like also Delaney Walker and his toe has remained sidelined the entire time. That he's probably going to play week 1, but he might be limited. So does this, I guess this hurts Taywan Taylor the most?
It definitely hurts Taywan Taylor the most. And this is one of those ones where Rashard Mathews has been falling into like the 11th, 12th, 13th round range. And that's where I was starting to really gobble him up, because if he's healthy, he's going to be the number 2. Like, this is the same thing when Rashard Mathews talked about the Dolphins. When he came over from the Dolphins, people just ignored him and not realized that Tennessee were aggressive going after Rashard Mathews. He was one of the first signings. It wasn't like there was leftover wide receivers and the Titans were like, oh, whatever, we'll take Rashard Mathews. They went after him because Rashard Mathews was extremely efficient on his per play basis when he was at the Dolphins, comes over and has been a very good wide receiver with the Titans. But for whatever reason, whether it's the Corey Davis excitement, which I'm as excited as anybody else for Corey Davis, especially because they're using him every way they can, in quotes over there, he's always overlooked by something. Now it's because of the injury. So it's the excitement of Taywan Taylor, obviously, as well. But I think Rashard Mathews will, if he's healthy by 100% healthy by week 3, he's going to supplant Taywan Taylor. Taywan Taylor will be the 3rd receiver. Taylor's not going to stay in front of Rashard Mathews if Rashard Matthews is 100%.
To Seattle, J.D. McKissic's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a foot injury. Penny is practicing, but he still has that broken finger, and apparently he weighs like 240 pounds now. I was more on board with Chris Carson than you were, obviously, because you really like the talent with Penny. I think you can draft Carson and at least gamble that he can hold this job, and maybe it's almost like this Chubb situation where they just turn to Penny next year.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I have him now. I have him almost back-to-back, similar to the Brown situation, because, I can like Penny's talent more than anybody else, and I'm not more than anybody. There's other people out there that are on the same bandwagon, but the fact is there's just so many red flags at this point now. He sounds like Penny is going to be ready for week 1, and I still think he could take over, because if you talk about talent versus talent, it's undeniable, in my opinion, that Penny is better than Carson. People have revisionist history. I told you that before with Chris Carson, that he was great last year. He wasn't. He had one good game. Fantasy-wise, he had 2 good games because he scored a touchdown in the other one where he was still barely getting good rushes in that one. And even go to that last game, he was playing against a miserable San Francisco defense. They were grinding out the clock at the end of the game. I don't ever like the argument of take things away, but you do have to take it into the equation. Chris Carson is a decent running back. Penny is I would say excellent running back, but the weight, the injury, the fact that he's not getting the touches and he's been behind, he has basically missed the entire preseason because of the injury. It's going to take time if it even happens at this year at this point.
Okay, Doug Baldwin, according to Pete Carroll, is going to be ready for week 1. He's doing sprints with that knee problem. He has now dropped to pick number 31 in PPR drafts. I've seen him go even lower than that and slip into the 4th round. I'm still actively targeting Doug Baldwin. I still have him as a top 10 receiver. I think he's going to be great. What do you think?
Yeah. Hands up emojis. Yeah, I tell you what, I moved them back up to 11 last week with this report that everything's on track for week 1, because yes, we'd like to see him knock off some rust and play a little bit in the preseason. Doesn't look like that's going to happen, but he's Doug Baldwin. And you want to talk about target share? Let's talk about this team. Who else is Russell Wilson going to? Honestly, you look at it, and Doug Baldwin should just be gobbling up the offensive targets. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he's much higher than 11 or even 10 for you. He finishes around 6 or 5 this year, just because of how much work he sees in the passing game. As if he's healthy, 16 games. I've been taking Doug Baldwin recently, and I actually just did a draft early today. I had the 6th pick, and I took him in the 2nd round. You know what? The wide receivers were going so fast that I was looking at Doug Baldwin, Mike Evans, and T.Y. Hilton, somebody else, and I was like, you know what? I'm taking Doug Baldwin.
To Kansas City, Sammy Watkins having a week, according to reporters at a training camp.
Having a week.
I still have him down at wide receiver, number 37 or something like that. But does it interest you at all with Sammy Watkins?
A little bit. I have him at 33, only because of the same thing I've said before, is that we don't know if Patrick Mahomes is going to have an affinity for Sammy Watkins at times, or even more than Tyreek Hill. But what we've seen so far, it looks like Patrick Mahomes likes Tyreek Hill just as much as Alex Smith did. And obviously Alex Smith didn't play with Sammy Watkins. But all that being said, my point is I, a few months ago, was saying that there could be a situation where Watkins ends up being the number 1 target for this team. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but it looks like he's going to be more involved than some people might have thought, where we're expecting it to be only Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and Sammy Watkins is picking up the scraps with Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. It looks like it could be a little bit more than that, but I still think that's only wide receiver 3 value.
They also cut Chark West to save almost $2 million worth of cap space. Does that benefit Kareem Hunt in his prospects of pass catching out of the backfield? Because they still have Damian Williams on the roster, and that feels like what Damian Williams is there for.
No, see, nothing ever affected me when it came to Kareem Hunt. People, I think, are reaching for reasons not to like him. And I think it's more so because it's a tough decision when you're in that second half of the 1st round of the Hunt, Fournette, Melvin Gordon. So what does everybody do? Instead of talking about the positives and talking about how amazing he was and talking about the fact that he led the league in rushing, despite the fact that Andy Reid screwed around with this guy in the middle of the season, despite the fact that they had a pretty miserable offensive line situation at the same time where they were losing pieces, and then they came back and Kareem Hunt was great, is still led the league in rushing. So now let's look at the negatives. How do we break these guys apart? And everybody always heads down the negative route. With Melvin Gordon, it's like, well, his per touch efficiency isn't that great. Leonard Fournette has injuries. Kareem Hunt, well, there's Spencer Ware and Andy Reid. So people look for reasons not to like players. I've always been, you know what? Kareem Hunt is amazing. Kareem Hunt deserves everything that he should be as a 6th, 7th round or 6th, 7th pick off the board.
To Dallas, Zach Martin said there's no way he'll miss week 1, although reports are that he might actually sit out week 1. So he's out, and center Travis Frederick probably out week 1, maybe more, with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which I've never heard of and didn't want to
I've never either.
I didn't want to Google it because there might be like an image that I just don't want to see that comes up. I hate this medical stuff. So it's an illness, and he is probably not going to play. What does this do to Zeke in this offensive line? Because I'm not convinced Martin's going to be in.
If Martin is out also, it takes a little bit of a hit, but it's Ezekiel Elliott, and the guy's probably going to touch the ball 400 times this year. And I say that because even if Martin and Frederick were out for the entire season, we're talking about 400 touches for a running back. Leonard Fournette in 13 games last year with the injuries, with the situation out there, because of how many times he touched the ball, still finishes RB7. And Ezekiel Elliott is better than Leonard Fournette. And that's really comes down to, I think people are way too This is another one. People want to look for reasons not to take somebody instead of liking the player just for who he is. This is still an offensive line. Let's just take both those pieces out as well. Let's make another argument. Would you say that the Dallas Cowboys offensive line with no Martin and no Frederick is not probably still better than the Giants or the Bengals or like those type of offensive lines? So it's not like they turned into the worst offensive line in the world because they lost two pieces. It's not like the guys behind them are you and me. So I just don't understand. I'm still taking Zeke number 4.
Okay. Finally, Arizona. Cardinals. Let's see here. What do we got for Arizona? Oh, yeah. Christian Kirk has played himself into the mix for the number 2 receiver job. That's good because you just drafted the guy. But I think a lot of that is probably because Bryce Butler's been on the sidelines. Do you want any part of anyone on Arizona outside of Fitz and DJ?
Yes, let's go back to, I think we did it on the draft. And I said that people don't think Christian Kirk can play outside, and he can. And I, at that time, said, as of today, Christian Kirk was the second most talented wide receiver on the Cardinals. My only issue and what I was worried about and what ended up happening for a little time was if the Cardinals were kind of bullheaded, in my opinion, and only wanted him behind Larry Fitzgerald to learn out of the slot, which is a great person to learn from. And then, he would see a ton of success out of the slot, but that was obviously going to hamper his value for this year. The Bryce Butler was fortuitous for Kirk because now they got to say, you know what? Well, we need somebody playing outside. Let's see what he can do. And hey, guess what? Because you drafted him, as you said, he can play outside. I do think he is the second best option on this team in the passing game outside of David Johnson, obviously. So you talk about the late round flyers, and I'll take him off the list, but Christian Kirk would have been one of them.
Breaking news as we scroll through this. I'm paying attention to Twitter. Ravens rookie tight end Hayden Hurst has a stress fracture in his foot. Will undergo a procedure today to insert a screw, and he's out 3 to 4 weeks. He was being undrafted anyway, but this probably concentrates more market share for Crabtree and John Brown, right?
And Mark Andrews, if you want the tight end for the Ravens, the concern with...
Maybe that sounds like more of a DraftKings play than anyone you should ever draft.
I wouldn't say necessarily. Like the rookie tight ends, we know this all the time. The reason that Ingram was so great last year is because he was the only guy left standing for that offense. But this is the Ravens offense, and they do use the tight end, whoever. I mean, they're picking people up off the street every single year and making them have value again. And that's what we're doing with this team. Mark Andrews was the better receiver and the better tight end prospect than Hayden Hurst, and they took him later in the draft. That was what I joked about at the time. Like you said, I'm not drafting him in your standard size league, but if you're playing in a 20 team or a 20 round draft, either one of those, and you're drafting a second tight end, I'm taking Mark Andrews over the likes of, I don't know, Austin Seferian-Jenkins.
Okay. Finally, let's close on... There are some late round flyers that I want to throw out to you. You throw some back at me. So for people doing their drafts this weekend or into next week, whenever it is, just some guys after the 10th round that you can take a flyer on. The first one that I'm going to start off with, it's attached to a news story, and I just want it to be true. So I'm going to try to will it into existence. However, ESPN Saints reporter Mike Triplett pegs Jonathan Williams as the leading candidate to fill the Mark Ingram role during his 4-game suspension. They've already cut Terrence West. It looks like that will be his role. You might be able to mine some value very early on in the season, but I keep saying this about Mark Ingram. What if Williams is just better and keeps the job?
I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, it's true because Mark Ingram's the worst running back in football.
For you, obviously.
I mean, in reality it is. I mean, I don't know what Kool-Aid you're drinking, but I think that Williams, if he performs, he can keep the job.
I don't think he'll keep the job, but I think the bigger threat to me is that Mark Ingram doesn't come back into the definitive lead and kind of that 60-40 split where he's getting 55, 60% of the workload every single week. That's where I'm more concerned about what this does to Mark Ingram than I do for Jonathan Williams. But I'm with you. I've been taking Jonathan Williams in tons of drafts over the past 2 weeks because all we wanted to know is who the number 2 is going to be in the time that Ingram was out. And Jonathan Williams, as you and I talked about before, I think just last week, people forgot already. He looked really good at times when he was with the Bills before he got suspended back then, too.
Okay. Who's the first late round flyer you want to check out?
You know what? You stole one of them, so I'll go different at wide receiver. And people are taking him already. I still think you should because this team moved on from their number 2 wide receiver who hasn't got a job since they left them. Your boy Sexwell LaFell is John Ross. John Ross. I know he's limited. I know he's a 9 route with a little bit more skill. He's a little bit more skilled than Torrey Smith when it comes down to that, but his speed, it just makes up for it where you can get that separation. He's going to be the number 2 wide receiver. And if you're talking about a number 2 wide receiver on any of the 32 teams, that's fantasy value. I don't care if you're the worst passing offense in the league. You have value as the number 2 wide receiver. And John Ross deserves some value, especially if you're looking for those big home run plays, there's very few that are bigger than him.
The next one for me, and I'm sure it's the one that you would agree on, that is the one that we're going to throw out there, and we're probably going to target like 10th, 11th, 12th round. John Brown is just having such a good camp. You keep mentioning that he's out of the West. He's now into the East. It might be better for his health, if nothing else, and he's the perfect complement for Joe Flacco's arm, and we know he's going to be the solidified number 2. He's playing all the snaps. You might not like the Ravens offense, but this is a big play guy that could turn out to be relatively consistent week after week after week.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I've actually been taking John Brown even a little bit earlier just to make sure I get him at this point because the hype is starting to come around on him. Hey, you know what? That guy that had 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns with the Cardinals a couple years ago, that talent is still there because ever since then it's been dealing with that sickle cell and the altitude. So yes, it's John Brown, and I own a high percentage of John Brown.
Okay, who's next for you?
Do you want me to go running back? I'll go running back. Look. It's a handcuff type of situation, but we're digging deep at running back because there's so many names. Everybody knows the names at running back at this point. Like if I said, oh, go draft Matt Breida late. Okay, people go like, yeah, I know to draft Matt Breida. No kidding. So I'm going to say that what I thought was going to happen, even when they signed Jonathan Stewart, just in case Saquon Barkley gets hurt, Wayne Gallman is the backup that I want for the Giants, not Jonathan Stewart, who's been outplayed by Gallman this entire time. Gallman was just drafted last year from Clemson, is a very nice running back. If you're looking at the end of drafts and you're drafting the Chase Edmonds and the Latavius Murrays, who's going a little bit earlier than that. But if you're drafting those guys where you're like, hey, if the person in front of him gets hurt, who's going to get the majority of the touches and maybe find some value for me, it's actually Wayne Gallman.
Yeah, for me, I think I'd rather draft John Kelly or even Edmonds in that spot because I project them to be in a better part of an offense. They still do have Jonathan Stewart around, and those two guys could step into the role. I don't know necessarily if Edmonds would just take over, but I could see him having a 75% snap share.
Oh, I'm with you. I said that when they drafted him. I'm 100% with you on the Edmonds, is that he'll be an RB2 if David Johnson gets hurt. There's not a question in my mind. The Kelly one is a little bit more concerning because they seem to like Brown. I'm not sure that Kelly gets the entire workload if anything were to happen.
Last guy for me, and again, this is just a situation, and if I have John Brown, I probably won't take Ryan Grant, but he's going to be the number 2 in Indianapolis.
I'm taking both of them.
Yeah, I mean, you can take both of them, but I think that he might be the number 2 receiver in Indianapolis. Jack Doyle could actually be the second most leading target getter on the team over Grant, but I still think it's worth like a 14th round pick.
Yeah, I've actually been taking him a little bit earlier because check the tape. Didn't I just say it to you last week? Was when I gave you the scenario where I said, hey, if I could tell you who the number 2 wide receiver for the Colts was as of today for all 16 games, people would be taking him in the 8th round. Didn't I say that to you?
Yeah, you said it on the show.
I just don't remember. I was legitimately asking. I wasn't trying to be smarmy.
Oh, yeah, no, it was you, and you did say that.
Okay, yeah, so I'm with you on Ryan Grant. I have him in a lot of, and you know what? I don't mind owning Ryan Grant and John Brown. I don't know why wouldn't you want both? Yeah,
I don't need that many receivers. Like at some point,
okay.
You're just taking too many flyers. Like I'll start taking other running backs potentially. It depends on the build of my team. For one thing, who else I've drafted. But like I don't need a whole bunch of like potential wide receiver 3s on my bench. Like the potential is there, I suppose, but they're still just flyers. I do want to spend more allocation towards running back because I tend to go wide receiver heavier at the front of the draft. But last one from you, very quickly.
Mike Williams.
He's not going that low anymore, is he?
Yeah, he is.
Okay, then take him.
I double checked just to make sure. He's actually going 133. So there you go. You know what? I'll double down. I'll give you two at the same time just in case. Mike Williams and Anthony Miller. But a lot of people are on Anthony Miller. I can see Anthony Miller climbing into like the 9th round by the time we hit the end of these drafts this week. But Mike Williams, the reason I bring him up too is because there's a lot of talk about Tyrell Williams over this last week, and people are starting to get worried like, oh, Tyrell Williams is locked into the number 2 spot. Look, it really comes down to Mike Williams was drafted where they drafted him, inside the top 10 as a draft pick back when they had Tyrell Williams last year as well. Is honestly, there's an argument that he's the best red zone option on this team as of today. And he is the number 2 talented wide receiver behind Keenan Allen as of today. So, you know me, I've been a huge Mike Williams fan, and I'm going to continue to bang that table.
Last two for me, James White, who we both agree on is just going way too low in PPR formats. And I don't know where Peyton Barber is going in drafts. It all depends on the draft at the time. But I've seen him go as late as like the 12th round still, even earlier this week, which is just insane. But he might go in like the 5th round in some drafts if you do them on the weekend. Like, I don't know where he's going. I would draft Peyton Barber, but if you can get him, like after the 8th round, get him.
Yeah, he's apparently 131 right now. But as you said, I mean, there's one draft where it could be 50 spots higher.
Yeah. All right, that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Jake, tell everyone what's going on at The Athletic.
Yeah, they did tons of articles every single day. You got Emery Hunt that actually just brought out 6 players you need to watch for Dynasty because he's a scout, former running back. Renee Miller's got the brain science. Salfino's got stats. I've got my stuff. That's all you care about. The rankings will be updated after this weekend for preseason week number 3. I actually just checked in with the Seahawks and the Cleveland beat writer, just finding out, those are the 2 teams people are asking a ton of questions about. So a ton of stuff over there. But you know the deal. What do I say? What do I tell you every time, Pat? All in kid. I tweet out everything anyway.
That's true. Then you can just check the link and you can get Jake's rankings up on theathletic.com. I'm Pat Mayo. Go check out my updated rankings either in the description of this video or up on dkplaybook.com. Subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio versions wherever you can download podcasts. Free to use. Please leave an iTunes review if you get a chance. And if you want to get in a draw for $20 DK in the comment section, give the episode a like. Then leave your DraftKings handle and give me a reception and yardage total that you think Jordan Howard will end for the receiving game only. Not rushing, receiving or just catches and receiving yards. That's it. Anyway, go check out the win total shows, the DFS shows coming on the weekend, and then week 1 coverage starting next week, or 2 weeks. Starting in 2 weeks. I get all my times mixed up. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck with your drafts this weekend or in the future. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!